What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, June 29th, 2017, getting to the end of the month. Of course, next Tuesday is Independence Day. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And starting off here, first of all, a quick little program note. The lovely Lady Claire will not be joining us tomorrow in our third hour, but she will be joining us on Independence Day, so you can get your Claire fix then. You Clairaholics are going to have to just wait a few extra days, but she is going to be back on the air here. There has been yet another shakeup at the White House, and apparently Vice President Mike Pence's Chief of Staff, Josh Pitcock, has officially resigned, and a former Pence aide is expected to take his place. Hasn't been named yet, but I think we need more of these shakeups here. Anyway, it's being described as a voluntary departure, which doesn't really mean anything. Actually, we do have a name on it. He's going to be replaced by Nick Ayers, a Republican operative from Georgia. And I think that's actually a healthy trend of getting these D.C. insiders sort of moved away and start bringing in people who are operating outside the Beltway and are going to be less compromised. Trump really does need to scrape a lot of people out of that White House if he's going to regain control of his administration, because he's being manipulated. McMaster's is admitting they're feeding him bogus information. Harry Reid, during the early weeks of the presidency, was out there saying that we should just give Trump fake briefings and he'll do what we want. And Donald Trump really doesn't need that kind of complication in an already difficult, complex job. Now, as you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is up for re-election, and she is being opposed by Tim Canova. He's a Democratic law professor, and he's challenging Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz for her congressional seat next year. And one of his big campaign issues is it is time to look more closely at the murder of Seth Rich. Obviously, that's a topic that Debbie Wasserman Schultz does not want to even talk about, because the growing suspicion that it was an assassination for political reasons, for leaking the DNC emails, that's an issue that is going to work against her. So, yeah, he's doing absolutely the right thing here. Now, as you know, the corporate media, let's talk about the corporate media a little bit. The corporate media right now is dealing with several very damaging exposures of fake news. And in one example, they're responding to James O'Keefe's video about a CNN producer, John Bonifield, who basically came out and said, yeah, this Russia story is nonsense. They're doing it for ratings. They're pandering to their primarily young liberal audience. And so the Washington Post came on out with an attack ad saying that James O'Keefe fails to mention that Bonifield was located in Atlanta, not in Washington or New York, where most of the CNN coverage of national affairs are produced. And that's absolutely fake, because 2 minutes into the video, O'Keefe explicitly states that Bonifield is a producer from Atlanta, which is CNN's corporate headquarters. So they're still out there. Claire just clarified with me. Well, my goof, she will be on the show tomorrow. Apparently it's a week from tomorrow that she will have that scheduling conflict. Oh, the complex and difficult life of celebrities. So the corporate media is out there trying to deal with this, trying to go on the attack against those who are basically exposing that they are, in fact, fake news, and in the process of doing so, they're just simply coming out with more fake news. It's like they can't change their stripes, and I mentioned that before. Their business, as Mika Brzezinski actually came out and said, the job of the corporate media is to control what you think. That's what they're paid all that money for. They cannot change their business model. If they actually start reporting on the facts, their backers are going to put those checkbooks away. And they'll have to struggle along just like the independent media does. And they don't want to give up those huge paychecks and the fancy cars and the nice homes and the rest of it. So if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Now, former chief of the CIA's Soviet Analyst Division, Ray McGovern, and I had the great pleasure of spending some time with him on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, is out there saying that he's simply not impressed by the Washington Post claims about the Trump-Russia election interference collusion story. Say it's just not making any sense here. And he's absolutely right. So CNN is going on the attack, and it's out there saying that calling the corporate media fake news, it's Orwellian, it's sinister, and it's all Trump's fault. He made us do fake news, or whatever it is they're saying now. They're trying to regain the high ground in this war with the independent media, but they are trapped by their business model, and that is going to ultimately be their doom. Wolf Blitzer came on out with a statement that it is potentially very dangerous for Trump to call the corporate media an enemy of the people, which sounds dangerously close to a threat to me. But anyway, apparently yesterday on CNN's The Situation Room, Wolf Blitzer was asking White House Correspondents Association President Jeff Mason that has Mason talked to Trump about just how dangerous it is to be tarnishing the corporate media. Well, if the corporate media isn't reporting the news, if the corporate media is in fact, as Mika Brzezinski said, trying to control what we think, that doesn't sound like a very friendly thing, does it? And right now, in trying to wrap us in a bubble of misinformation, that's a hostile action. I think calling the corporate media the enemy of the American people is an accurate description. And Wolf Blitz is just out there wagging his finger saying, don't you do that, don't you do that. That's dangerous for you to call the corporate media the enemy of the people. Sean Hannity, who's one of the straight shooters who still has his job on the corporate media, is out there saying, we should put CNN 6 feet underground because it has lied itself to death. And yes, it has. And there's an object lesson here. Look at all the whoppers you've been told by CNN lately. The Russia collusion, Assad gassing his own people, Saddam's nuclear weapons, and start going back and asking yourself, has CNN been doing this all along? And the answer is, yeah, sure. So, anyway. Now, over at Project Veritas, they released another video today, and this one isn't particularly damaging to the corporate media, but it is funny as all get out to watch, because James O'Keefe is standing outside Jeff Zucker's home with a microphone and a camera crew. He identifies himself as being James O'Keefe, wanting to ask Jeff Zucker about this exposure, that the story is nonsense. And Jeff Zucker has the doorman to the building block the camera crew, and Jeff and his bodyguard literally run to the limousine to get away from him. Don't even say a word. It's the funniest thing to watch. It really is. Now, on a more serious note, of course, as you know, a major bombshell came from Seymour Hersh, who's at least used to be, in the corporate media world, a well-respected veteran investigative journalist. He was the guy who exposed the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War and the U.S. military's torture of Iraq prisoners at Abu Ghraib in 2004. This guy has broken major important stories. And, of course, his latest investigation was that Trump went ahead with that cruise missile attack into Syria in the absence of any evidence that there had been a gas attack at Idlib. In fact, the intelligence agencies were saying the Syrians bombed a weapons depot there that might have had chlorine stored there, but they didn't have sarin. And everybody knew this, and Trump went ahead with this attack, which was a clear violation of international law. Well, the corporate media at first tried to attack Seymour Hersh, but you don't go after a man with those credentials and have it stick. So now they're just trying to ignore the story with dignity. No, it didn't. We're going to report on something else. Oh, there's a fashion show over here. Let's talk about the health care debate. We're going to talk about anything at all except the fact that, once again, the U.S. government is caught lying to the American people in order to justify acts of aggression. Now, surprisingly, over at the New York Slimes, maybe, they're coming to understand that they are going to have to change their ways. And the New York Slimes has actually now admitted that the story about how 17 intelligence agencies all concluded Russia was hacking the election, it was a complete fabrication. It was a complete fabrication. So maybe the New York Times is thinking they're going to regain their readership by starting to be honest, and it's a good first step, because they're in serious financial trouble. They're having to let people go. They apparently closed a few of the floors in their signature building, and they're going to be converted to office space rentals. That's how much economic trouble they're in right now. Meanwhile, over at Slate, you have to wonder where they're getting these people or what drugs they're serving in the coffee bar, because Christina Cauterucci was out there with an article saying that women will not be equal to men until they murder more people. And then Christina went on to brand LGBT conservatives as queer villains. Direct quote. And that is really over the top there. And she's actually saying, you know, women should be murdering more. Women should be raping more. Then they'll be the equal of men. Whew. I need to have the theme from the Twilight Zone on my little sound cart machine here for stories like this. Now, Sean Spicer has come on out with a very interesting observation. And by the way, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates. I think I missed that at the 6-minute mark, so welcome back to the network here. Sean Spicer came on out and said, basically today, most corporate media reporters, they just want to be a star on YouTube, because if they can come out with a sensational or provocative story, it'll be copied and put all over YouTube, and they'll be counting their views, and they're seeing themselves as media stars rather than as journalists. And that is a very dangerous situation, because just like the tabloid magazines, you're going to do anything it takes to get attention. You know, the Incredible Frog Boy is on the loose again. And so these corporate media journalists, in their desire for YouTube stardom, are contributing to the tabloidization of America's corporate media, which I think is ultimately where they're headed. They're rapidly becoming irrelevant, because people just, if they're watching at all, they're watching like I do to find out, what are we being lied to about today? Okay, so getting on back to Syria. Syria, to nobody's surprise, has rejected the U.S. allegations of an impending chemical attack, and basically saying it's misleading, false, and baseless. Yeah, we already knew that. And again, it's propaganda to start a war. Now, we're starting to hear from other people that, mostly people who are retired and they can't be touched by their employers anymore, that, yeah, there were no chemical weapons. There was no chemical weapon attack in Syria. And apparently the military, along with the intelligence agencies, were telling Trump, or at least they were telling Trump's advisors, and maybe Trump's advisors just lied to him. And they turned around and said, oh, yeah, the CIA says it happened, the military says it happened, and Trump said, well, okay, we're going to fire the cruise missiles. We need to find out if, in fact, Donald Trump is being fed false briefings by his own staff, because he's doing so many things that the American people do not agree with. And it could be very, very dangerous if they've succeeded in corralling him and giving him a false picture of what's going on, then yeah, they can make him do whatever they want him to do. And that is a dangerous, dangerous situation. Okay, so moving on down here. And again, we've all known this is nonsense. For those of us paying attention, we've known it was nonsense going back to the USS Maine, Gulf of Tonkin, Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, and everything. But most Americans really woke up over that Saddam issue. Saddam's weapons of mass destruction was a flat-out lie. Was a flat-out lie. And how many more times do you have to be lied to before you're ready to stand up en masse and scream at the corporate media and the government, you guys are full of it, and we're just not going to listen to you anymore? Meanwhile, I think the United States or the government, or the war hawks at least, are feeling a sense of panic because things are going very badly for the U.S. war hawks in Syria. The Syrian army is on the threshold of a major victory along the Aleppo-Hama highway. They're regaining control of that vital route. And they're saying they may have complete control over that in mere days. Meanwhile, the Desert Hawks Brigade has deployed a large reinforcement for more battles against ISIS. And, of course, we know that a lot of the U.S.-backed terrorist groups are now fighting each other over territory and access to materials and so forth. So it's going very, very badly for the U.S. Now, as you know, yesterday it seemed like we were going to get a reprieve from a new attack into Syria when Mattis came on out and said, well, you know, it looks like Syria's called off the chemical weapons attack. They heeded our warning. And, of course, that was followed up by Sergei Lavrov's warning to the United States that if the United States attacks Syria, Russia will respond proportionately. Missile for missile, plane for plane, boot on the ground for boot on the ground, and so forth and so on. But there's a very alarming article that came out just today, and this is over in Tasman News, where, according to American defense officials, the U.S. military has ships and aircraft in place to strike Syria if Donald Trump orders an attack. So they're out there rattling the sabers just as hard as they can. I would not be surprised to see the attack happen this weekend or on the 4th of July. And they'll try and wrap a flag around it. Yes, America is still great. We went in and bombed another third world country to prove how butch we are here. Now, Mattis is also out saying that the Syrian fight is only going to get more complicated after Raqqa is captured. And that is a reversal of the earlier policy, because U.S. officials have been saying for months that the invasion of Raqqa as the end-all, be-all battle against ISIS, and once we defeat ISIS there, the war is going to be over. But now they appear to be looking to extend it. And remember, Nikki Haley was up at the United Nations yesterday, again saying that the U.S. policy now is Assad must go, Assad must go, Assad must go. And so now they're looking for a reason for the U.S. to stay in Syria while they continue to work on that agenda. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry has come on out, this is Maria Zakharova, saying that the U.S. disinformation campaign against Syria is a warning sign of a coming military intervention. She's got a magnificent grasp of the obvious with that statement. Of course, that's what it is. Because the U.S. can't back off. If they are kicked out of Syria and Assad remains, it will be seen as the first major military defeat for the United States since Vietnam. Now, the U.S. has lost a lot of these covert attempts at intervention, but those never make the newspaper. You don't hear about them. When the U.S. goes into a country and tries to kick out the ruler and get kicked out themselves, it somehow doesn't make the front page. We'll be back after these commercials. Welcome back to our show here. And so obviously there's a big issue, and it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to figure out if Donald Trump is actually being lied to by his advisors as to what's going on. Because that attack into Syria was a hideous mistake. It was hugely embarrassing because slightly more than half of those Tomahawk cruise missiles didn't even hit the base. They flew on and hit other things and killed other people. So it was a goof, as well as a violation of international law. And a lot of people are very upset with Donald Trump, and I am one of them, because during his campaign, he was out there saying, I want to stay out of Syria. It's time to end all these interventions. Obviously, somehow he has been convinced that this is all really necessary. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just wanted to quote one of my favorite presidents, Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that the only road to peace in Syria must consist of the current regime that's there. It won't happen if regime change is part of the plan. And it's like our government just doesn't understand that.
Well, what's really amazing is our government understands there really isn't anybody who's going to be able to take his place that will hold Syria, calmly. That getting rid of Assad is going to trigger just more chaos and suffering across the country.
Yes, I'm kind of hoping, and I think this is the case. I kind of think it's the deep state. I don't think that Trump is really the one that's doing it. I think that it's the deep state. Having said that, I would hope that he would come out and say something about it. But who knows? Maybe they threatened everybody that he's ever loved. You know what I mean?
Maybe his advisors are saying that the polls are showing the American people are fully on board with more war in Syria. If he is being lied to, and the comments from Harry Reid and McMaster seem to imply that he is, they're going to lie to him about everything. They're going to create this complete false reality around him to steer him in the direction that they want.
Yeah, I think his advisors are lying. I think the people that advise on war lie about all the wars that we've ever gone into, whether it's these people or advisors from other presidencies. I think they're liars. You advised us to watch America's War on Drugs, and I watched the first part of that, and it's obvious that the United States is an evil, evil government.
It's a narcocracy.
The people, it's the government. That's right. It's the government, and it's pathetic that people are just walking around, worrying about getting new cars and going to football games, as opposed to really trying to straighten our government out to be a peace and loving government. We're just not that, and it's pathetic where we're at. And I also listened to a gentleman by the name of Mark Passio. I don't know if you've ever heard him before. But what he was saying is that we have a perfect opportunity to bring the pedophilia ring to justice. That there's emails showing guilt that high-ranking officials of our government are involved in pedophilia. And we really need to focus on that. I think that would bring the whole government down, and it needs to come down.
Well, I think it's in the process of self-destructing, and I'm still maintaining I'm not encouraging any violence. Because if there's one thing the U.S. government does know how to do well, it's kill people. But it seems to be tearing itself apart. We're coming to the end of what little resilience remains in the economy. We're stuck in all these wars. Again, the fact that you don't see people going around saying there's a problem doesn't mean they're not aware. And again, go back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, or even better, the Romanian Revolution, when Ceausescu came down. Because if you'd gone into Romania just 1 month before it happened, you would have thought everybody was happy, everybody was content, there was no hostility, but it was all there. It was just hidden from the surface. And I think the same thing is happening here. Thank you for the phone call, Alex. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take another phone call, interesting story just came through here. I was mentioning before how the corporate media is in economic trouble, especially the New York Times. They're having to convert some of the floors in their office into office rental spaces. There have been a lot of cuts, layoffs, firings going on, and apparently copy editors at the New York Times are staging a walkout to protest all the job cuts going on there. Well, if you're losing your audience because you're lying to them, yeah, there's a problem there. All right, we're going to go back here to the phones. Kyle in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? We lost Kyle in Pennsylvania. All right. Okay, getting on back here. Now, Hawaii's Tulsi Gabbard, and I am rapidly falling in friendship with this lady, and she's out there. She doubts this gas attack in Idlib. She's questioning the evidence, of which there doesn't seem to really be any. So good for Tulsi on that one. Now, interestingly enough, while Nikki Haley is up at the United Nations screaming for Assad's removal, other nations in the coalition are kind of backing away from that, saying the real fight is and should be against ISIS. That's the threat. Assad isn't bothering anybody. It's ISIS. Of course, we know that the U.S. Helped create ISIS to go against Assad. But even over in France, Macron is saying, Assad's not the bad guy here. Let's pull away from this nonsense. Everybody's getting their plans together for the G20 that is coming up, and there's going to be a lot of meetings there where a lot of this stuff hopefully will get settled down, but we'll see. Once again, a mortar shell has landed in Syria's Golan Heights, hitting empty dirt, and in response, once again, Israel attacks a Syrian government position. I'm not sure if this is the fourth or fifth time this has happened in the last week, but according to this article in Sputnik News, sources within Syria are saying Israel may have a larger plan behind all of this. We know that Israel wants to grab the Golan Heights and make it part of Israel, along with all that oil and gas. But they may also be trying to engineer a buffer zone to put more distance between Israel and Hezbollah. But when you look at the military activity that Israel is carrying out against the Syrian forces, there's obviously some kind of a plan at work there. And again, if Israel's going to do something dramatic, and they've been bombing Gaza again, we can expect to see something major on the 4th of July when we're all distracted. Now, Iraq's forces have managed to capture the ruined mosque in Mosul, where 3 years ago ISIS declared its caliphate. And so Iraq is saying it's gone apart. It's gone. The fictitious state of Islamic State has fallen. They've taken at least the spiritual, if not the de facto capital of the Islamic State. So it may be a bit premature, but it will be a psychological blow to the ISIS fighters. It would be like our troops engaged in all these wars all over the globe if all of a sudden Washington, D.C. were captured by the enemy. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. David from Crucial Nonsense. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I hope you're doing well.
As well as can be expected. What's going on?
Absolutely. Good news and having Claire with us this Friday. I want to talk about digital privacy briefly as regarding to Skype. As most of you know, at the end of this month, Skype kills all of the old versions that supported the peer-to-peer that offered us security in the past and used to work so good in favor of shunting absolutely every bit of the traffic through their cloud. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cost them a lot of money on bandwidth, but of course they're giving that away free to us because they're using that to herd us into the whole spy engine, just like Gmail and all these other free services. Like you have said many times.
They've been pushing that for a very, very long time. Of course, I can't imagine anybody dumb enough to say or do something over Skype that they wouldn't want to be made public, and that's a good rule of thumb for all electronic devices now.
Exactly. Exactly. As you said before, I think a lot of this is bluff and bluster, just like the Gestapo did in World War II with the Nazis. We see everything. That's why they're herding everybody into this, cloud methodology here and trying to kill all the peer-to-peer. Well, there's a replacement that we have been testing out for the past couple of weeks called TOX, Tango Oscar X-Ray. It's an open source platform. It used to, it does what Skype used to do pretty well, actually. And there's all sorts of different versions and clients out there for every platform imaginable. So you might want to check out Tango Oscar X-Ray, T-O-X, TOX, because that's what we're going to. This is the last time I'm going to be able to be on RBN on Skype because as of the end of this month, I'm deleting it. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention to everybody. There's some new project out there. I guess it's a Russian operating system called React OS.
Yes.
And it's a Windows clone. And it's not exactly as mature as Windows yet, but for what they've done with it, it's fast and pretty nimble for the smaller applications. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get your 3D Studio Max to work on it just yet.
I can't get 3D Studio Max to work on Windows 7 for crying out loud.
And it should. I mean, the whole darn thing is ridiculous. What I noticed with the React OS is, at 140 some megabytes, for the entire operating system, the thing runs much faster and much more streamlined than even Windows XP. There's so much bloat attached to these operating systems, you got to wonder what the heck they're doing in the background. They have installed bugs and backdoors into everything. Linux is not immune to that stuff. You've got to be very careful with all this stuff. But at least with open source stuff and a little bit of help from some talented developers, you can find some of this stuff and start shutting it down. Anyway, that's really all I got there, Mike. Have a very safe and happy Independence Day, and I promise you I'll try to launch a couple of rockets for you.
Oh, please do, because, when Claire and I first moved here to Hawaii, fireworks were legal, not just on 4th of July, but on Chinese New Year and regular New Year, and it was sort of a running joke. We came out here for our honeymoon when we got married, and wow, it's New Year's, we can get fireworks. So we celebrated our marriage with all these fireworks, and now because of all the liberal crying, whiny snowflakes, and probably a government that doesn't want us comfortable with handling things that go bang. Everything now is basically a popper. I mean, you go into the stores, and you're already seeing these big packages that look like the old fireworks assortments you would buy, but everything in there is actually a party popper. They're different shapes, different colors, different sizes, but they all do exactly the same thing. You pull the string, some paper streamers come out. Hardly a satisfying experience on that. Now, before you go, quick question. Am I correct in my recollection that React OS is actually open source, that you can actually get this?
Yes.
You can get the source code and compile it yourself so that you know what is in there. That was one of the things I really loved about the early Unix, that you would get it as a source code distribution and compile it for your platform.
Absolutely, and if you can find a clean, non-compromised compiler, you can have some modicum of security. That doesn't mean you need to let your guard down. But hey, open source Windows, I think that's noteworthy right there. I'm going to be playing with that for a while. I'll keep you posted on all the progress I make on it. But hey, I thought it was pretty cool, and it's tiny. There's a live OS ISO out there that you can burn it to a disk and boot it without even having to install it, and you can play with it and test it out, just kind of like the Linux stuff does. So I really like what they're doing with it. I hope they continue. That's a very awesome thing. We need to start getting rid of all this commercial, bloated, spyware-infested stuff and start making some of our own things, work, because there's still options out there. It's just a lot of work having to search it out. So we'll keep you posted on that stuff and anything we find to help you out, and the Rivera's Rangers as well. I will definitely forward it along.
Well, thank you very much. I'm already looking at the Talks website, and I am going to link to it during the next commercial break. Because I remember in the early days of computer, you wrote most of your own software, you knew what it could do. If something broke, you could fix it. And today, you're just dependent on these large corporations, which are not responsive to their end users. In fact, most of them now, when you buy software, that end user license agreement, they're not making any promises about it. There's no support. Everything comes down to reinstall. And like I said, I have never been able to get my 3D Studio Max to install on Windows 7. It just keeps coming back saying error, 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 and nobody's got an answer on this thing. So we'll see what happens on that. I mean, I'm not doing a lot of 3D work these days anyway, and I have a license for Maya, which I use if I need to do something like that. But I'm interested in React. It sounds like it's small enough to actually fit on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, with the ARM processor, though, if you actually compiled it, I think you could probably get it to work. I know that they are trying to push Windows 10 for the Raspberry Pi, and I tell you, that makes me cringe even thinking about it.
No way.
The Raspberry Pi
Debian
is so stable and so awesome. You know, but Windows 10 on that thing, I'd rather take it out and with a sledgehammer. I think it's ridiculous. They are going the wrong direction with that stuff.
That's what happened to me. I mean, I gave Windows 10 an honest, fair evaluation. We took the laptop that we used to support Claire's choir, was running Windows 7, and we hit the upgrade button, and it was an absolute disaster. First of all, it erased all the music files that had been on there. I'm not talking about moving to the wastebasket. I'm talking about they were gone. And it kept trying to force me to change my password to my Microsoft account. That's stupid. Anybody who knows your Microsoft account information, they've got half the login information. And it was just a terrible operating. And unfortunately, the rollback button didn't really work all the way. And when we got it back to Windows 7, it was just, nothing was working. I literally threw the physical machine away. It was just that unsalvageable at that point. And
that's sad.
Yeah.
Good PTSD on the computer from having Windows 10 anywhere near it. That's kind of ridiculous. I tell you, it makes you long for the days of the Commodore, doesn't it?
Oh, well, I still have my VIC-20 up here, believe it or not. And it still works.
Yeah.
It still works.
I still got a 64 and it still works.
Oh.
It's absolutely amazing. You just turn it on and you can start typing, code in there and it still does what it does. I mean, for its day, that was a hell of a machine.
Well, it was fun.
We have gone the wrong direction ever since.
We have. Back then, computers were fun, and the Raspberry Pi kind of harkens back to that as well. Today, you're spending so much time just trying to keep the darn thing working, and you've got no time left over to actually do anything with it that you can make money with. I would say right now on this Windows 7 desktop I have, I'm probably spending about 1/3 of the time on it just fixing various problems and software bugs. I had a nasty experience the other day, and I know we're spending way too much time on this. I'm going to get back to the heavy news here in a bit, but I got to get this off my chest. I use a little tiny USB monitor to be able to see my phone calls, and in advance of Skype possibly not working on this second laptop, which is an XP machine, I got another Windows 7 laptop, and I got the newest version of this Proximus USB monitor, and I plugged it in and did the install, and it hosed the graphics on the Windows 7 machine. And of course, when you're researching a project, a product, you'll get all the glowing reviews and everything. And then once you know what to look for, you go on out, and I found all these website blog entries where they said, yeah, this thing does not really work with Windows 7. It's a holdover from XP, and I had to do a complete system restore to get that. Windows 7 laptop back. So it's very, very frustrating. These large computer corporations like Microsoft, they don't care because they feel you don't really have a choice. Well, guess what? We are building those choices. Going to open source, going to React. I'll trust an operating system from Russia before I trust anything that comes out of the United States. We know they're all compromised. Anyway, listen, David, we have walked down the path of nostalgia way too long on this thing. But thank you for the information. I'm going to link to the Talks chat on the next commercial break, which is just a few minutes away. So we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Kyle in Pennsylvania, who finally called back. Kyle, what's on your mind?
Well, first, just to piggyback on that real quick, if you're going to fool around with that React program, I would recommend running it on a virtual PC before actually installing it on yours. But other than that, do with it as you may. I don't know enough about it.
Well, I'm probably going to get, the bootable image on a CD, DVD, whatever it fits on, and I do run virtual machines on this desktop for things like Linux and XP, although now I'm doing most of my Linux on the Raspberry Pi.
Well, so the reason why I called, a lot of times, I'm going to be honest with you, I think you're a little bit alarmist as far as the Russia stuff goes, but I think you're absolutely spot on. The fact that they're out there saying if there's an attack, Haley Barber, you don't have to say if there's an attack, we will, respond. That's just begging the rebels to go out there and shoot up somebody and say it was a Russian. You don't show your hand like that. Moreover, I think there's also going to be a false flag against the mainstream media, violence. I've seen about 4 or 5 outlets today already claiming, don't you think this rhetoric is going to lead to some sort of violence against the mainstream media? And I think that that's really the only play that they have left.
It may well be. It may well be at all. Let's see. Well, okay. Yeah, you're right. They may try and play for sympathy that way. I frankly don't think it's going to work. And that's because people just aren't paying attention to it any longer. But yeah, what Wolf Blitzer was out there, it sounded, he was right on the borderline of a threat that Trump shouldn't be disparaging the corporate media as fake news. And by the way, apparently in his speech today, his presentation, he was introducing his nominee for the head of the FBI. He did call CNN fake news again, so he's not backing down on that one.
You can't do it. I'm so sick of these fainting Victorian mainstream media where they can attack anybody else as much as they want, but as soon as someone fires back, they act, oh, you can't do that. You're destroying a national treasure. Come on, man. Project Veritas should be up for the Pulitzer Prize.
I agree.
It's unbelievable.
I agree. Anyway, we got to let you go.
Project Veritas.
I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to post this thing about Talks, the alternative to Skype, and we'll be right back. It would help if I turn up the volume here. Welcome back to the show, and getting on back to the war zones. Apparently, Turkish armed forces have entered Syria's Idlib, and this was reported yesterday. And apparently, Turkey is creating a military base in the city. Now, I'm sure that Syria is not going to be very happy about this. It's also reported the Turkish armed forces, together with the Russian armed forces, will ensure security in the Syrian city. Okay, so maybe they're going to cooperate a little bit here. And this gets on back to this announcement coming out of Iraq, where they've recaptured that ruined mosque that is the spiritual center of Islamic State, and are now saying Islamic State does not exist anymore. And it's more symbolic than anything else. But it will create a huge morale problem, I'm sure. And they're already dealing with a morale problem. Like I said, we're getting reports that a lot of these U.S.-backed terrorist groups in Syria are actually fighting each other rather than the Syrian forces. So it is really a serious mess down there. Now, apparently, the ascension of Crown Prince bin Salman is not going along as smoothly as you might think. As you know, we got one report that Israel actually deployed warplanes to Saudi Arabia to be on standby in case there was an attempt at a counter coup. And we heard that Salman actually shut down a Saudi TV station for reporting that many of the Saudi chiefs across the nation are refusing to pledge him their allegiance. And so there may actually be a potential for a major upheaval in civil war. Apparently, a lot of the people in Saudi Arabia see Salman as way too cozy with the United States. He's getting cozy with Israel, which has got a lot of people very, very angry. He's on board with this idea of isolating and possibly making war on Qatar, and that has a lot of people very upset. So there is a potential for a civil war inside Saudi Arabia because of this. Now, NATO is pledging to send more troops to Afghanistan, thousands more troops to Afghanistan, which tells you how badly things are going up there. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, I don't know if did you talk about the S-400 preliminary deal between Russia and Turkey yet?
No, I did not.
Yeah, there's a preliminary deal where they're going to supply the S-400s to the Turkish military, which means the S-500 should be coming out sooner rather than later, I'd say at this point. Yeah, it's a pretty big, I think that's a big story. That tells you right there with Germany leaving the Incirlik Air Base and, the U.S., part of that neoliberal Marxist empire, is losing influence, and you can see it all over the place now.
Yeah, Turkey's pivoting to Russia, and that botched coup d'etat against Erdogan certainly did not help matters. And there is the other factor, that everybody in the region is watching the performance of U.S. weapons versus the Russian weapons, and they're starting to scramble to buy the Russian weapons. And like I said, one of the reasons that Donald Trump's cruise missile attack on that Syrian air base was a major goof-up was that more than half of those missiles missed the target. And those missiles that actually hit the airfield didn't hit anything important. And so people are looking at that, and they're getting concerned, especially those people who have already invested a huge amount of money in this weapon. Anyway, listen, do you have anything more, Dustin?
Oh, no, that's it. Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call now. Errol in the Netherlands, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What is on your mind today?
On my mind is the deep water horizon.
Really?
And also, yes, and also some people, I listen to your show, almost every day, and I heard some people saying, there are 600 years of oil that are in America, and we can get it. Well, I have a question for them. Why are we encapsulating, first of all, China, Russia, India, and all those other countries? Not for that. I don't know if you know Michael Rupert.
Yes, I do.
Mike Rupert.
Yes.
From Peak Oil, exactly, yes. And he said, this and that, there's a documentary also over that. And the interesting part of that is Deepwater Horizon. Why did they mess up that? And why did they put that, how do you call it, syringe, where they said that there was oil. So there was what he said about that Lindsay guy is just a preacher. It's just a preacher.
Yes.
I saw that video clip, and I was like, okay, it's just a preacher, you know? When we look now in the world, what's happening, and in the Middle East, and in America, because I know America, I know the West, we are all searching for renewables. We are all searching for gas or oil, because oil, and you said it also in this week, when you cannot put in that, or when you can put in that many energy and you cannot put it out, it's over. And that's the real fact. And people need to understand that. When you cannot put in something and you can put out, like I put in 50 and I get out 20, it's over.
Yes.
And that's the real fact. And people don't understand that. But some people have called in your show, and I find that very, very, very interesting. Exactly at the same moment, there were like two, three people talking about 1976.
Okay, well, you know, very often when we talk about a topic on the show, listeners who have some experience will then be motivated to call on in, so I'm not seeing anything unusual about that. Now, let me back on up and address some of the issues that you're talking about. First of all, I have not been able to confirm that there is a gigantic oil reserve underneath Gull Island. We do know there's a lot of oil in Alaska. We do know that there are a lot of drilling and pumping operations along that north coastal area, especially if you watch the show Ice Road Truckers. Now, the Deepwater Horizon, what that was all about is the government authorized this very risky program of drilling really deep into these formations where they knew there was oil but under extremely high pressure, which made it dangerous to harvest. But the reason they did that... the reason they did that is they knew that a coming war in the Middle East would disrupt the oil flow to the rest of the world. And the United States wanted to be positioned to be able to sell oil and gas to the rest of the world to make up for that shortfall, which would have brought a lot of money to the U.S. The problem is, like so many other things, the government wasn't really keeping watch on what was going on. Most oil-producing nations on Earth require what are called automatic or acoustic blowout preventers on the wellhead. Now, what a blowout is when you're down there drilling and you're pumping up the oil, every once in a while you will get a bubble of methane. And because the bubble of methane is so much lighter than the oil, it'll come up the pipe at tremendous velocity, and the oil following it is also traveling equally fast. And there's enough velocity there and enough mass to do some serious damage, even to those very heavy metal components. So that's what a blowout preventer is supposed to do. Now, the United States, let me finish. The United States does not require automatic blowout preventers. They allow the oil companies to use manual blowout preventers, which means somebody's got to be paying attention with their hand on that switch. And that is simply because an automatic blowout preventer is $500,000. And if you take account of all the oil platforms that are out there in the Gulf of Mexico, that's a huge chunk of change that the oil corporations didn't want to have to spend. Then we had the Minerals Management Service, which is supposed to keep an eye on all drilling and mining operations in the United States, and they were basically asleep at the switch, the same way the SEC was when Bernie Madoff was doing what he was doing. And the manual blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon was 4 years overdue for mandatory maintenance. And, of course, down there in that saltwater, corrosion, hostile environment, when the blowout actually happened, it simply shattered. And that was what led to that disaster. That's the story of the Deepwater Horizon. We've got to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our show.
Am I still on?
You're still on the air.
Okay. Why are they doing the tar sands? Do you know the tar sands in Canada?
Yes.
Why are they doing that?
Well, the same reason
that's more. That's more water to clean the oil. They use more water to clean the oil. And if you see how massive that operation is, why don't they just go down from what that guy said, that Lindsay guy, from, okay, we got 600 years of oil. Why the tar sands? Why? It's
well, again, I can't.
Also on the coast.
I cannot confirm.
I call it BS. I call it BS.
Well, yeah, like I said,
what Lindsay said, I call it BS. It's a religion.
I cannot confirm that there's a large, gigantic oil deposit under Gull Island. I was looking all last night. Outside of this Lindsay individual, I can't find any confirmation for it at all. So, but again, the reason they're doing tar sands and fracking, they're not just looking for oil, they're looking for oil that they can reach and harvest easily and cheaply. It all goes back to that unit cost of extraction. And the deeper you drill for conventional oil wells, the more expensive it gets. And so now they're looking for alternative technologies that allow them to grab oil that is much closer to the surface of the earth. And that's where this whole tar sands and fracking came from. And unfortunately, neither of these technologies are really penciling out. And they are proving to have very harmful side effects to the environment, such as increased earthquakes, the seepage of these dangerous chemicals back up to the surface.
Yes. We even have got it here in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Buildings are breaking down. Yes.
Okay.
Buildings are breaking down here in the Netherlands. We are doing here fracking in the Netherlands. It's unbelievable when you see what happens to houses. They've got cracks in it. The soil is going down and everything. Well, I want to say to you one thing. We have already, and we know the technology, we have already technology, and it is unlimited energy technology, but they don't want it for the people, because when the people know how they get the technology, then it's game over for them. And that is the trick. They want control. It's all about control.
Well, it's all about profit.
It's all about profitability.
It's all about profitability.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Profitability.
Errol,
Yes.
Errol, my turn. Okay.
Okay.
The oil corporations have invested a huge amount of money in the oil infrastructure, the wells, the pipelines, the refineries. They don't want to just shut it all down and turn it off. They want to keep it running, to keep making money off of the existing infrastructure. When they finally reach a point where they literally cannot find the raw petroleum to feed into that infrastructure, at that point, these alternative technologies will be made available for a small fee. And we will move our technological society forward. But they're not going to give up the oil economy until the oil really does run out.
Exactly. Thank you for my call, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the news here. John McCain is out there flapping his gums about Russia. The Russia threat is dead serious. And so he was out there writing this editorial over at USA Today. And again, repeating the same lies about how Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, invaded Ukraine in 2014, Russia attacked America's 2016 election, attempted to interfere in France's 2017 election, and all of those have already been refuted, but he's still out there lying. And he's trying to lay Montenegro, where there was a coup and murder plot, he's trying to lay that at Russia's feet. So, John, if you really feel that way, here's your rifle. Have fun. We'll call Vladimir Putin and tell him you're on your way. But Russia is now basically acknowledging they understand that part of the U.S. plan for global hegemonic domination is the U.S. is seeking regime change in Russia. And apparently there is a report out of the Pentagon's intelligence arm, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and it portrays Russia as increasingly wary of the United States. And it tries to make it look like Russia is being unreasonable because Moscow distrusts the U.S. efforts to promote democracy around the world. Well, I'm sorry, we keep hearing that we're bringing democracy to the rest of the world. It hasn't happened. In all of the interventions since the end of World War II, we're always told we're bringing democracy to these people, and what do they get? They get the Shah of Iran, dictator. They get Pinochet, dictator. They get all of these dictators, and they may have staged elections to make it look like it's legitimate. Remember when they put in Poroshenko, and then they quickly had an election that Poroshenko won because he was basically the only one practically running at all. It's not a real democracy when they do that, but that's their excuse. The fact is, in all these U.S. interventions, none of them have brought democracy to these countries. In fact, in many cases, such as Iran in 1953 and Chile in 1973, a true functioning democracy was brought down. So that's the reality here. But they're still out here with the same propaganda and apparently still think you're dumb enough to believe it here. Now, there's an interesting analysis over here in Blacklisted News that a possible U.S. false flag in Syria may be designed to prevent Trump from meeting Vladimir Putin at the G20 by creating this hostile climate. Well, we're now at war. I'm not going to talk to you. And I certainly hope it does not work. I think Trump needs to meet Putin, and I think Putin, who is a statesman, will have an opportunity to tell Trump, your problem is not Russia, your problem is not Syria, your problem is you're being lied to by your own people, who all have huge investments in defense contractors, or they've allegiance to Israel, and maybe try and talk some common sense into him. But we already learned that many of the people in the Trump administration, they're trying to poison Trump against Putin ahead of time. They don't want them to meet. They don't want them to talk. They're apparently very scared of that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's one aspect coming out of the Syria war that may have caught America's defense industry by surprise. And that is that everybody is getting a chance to see how America's weapons really work in real conflict versus Russia's. Now, here in the United States, the defense contractors will set up all these demonstrations and all these tests, and very often they're rigged. They'll put homing beacons on the target or all kinds of nonsense like that. And again, I refer you back to the book and the movie, The Pentagon Wars. It's a wonderful, wonderful film, and I understand it is out there on the internet someplace, where the tests get rigged to make a weapon look like it's really wonderful when it is a piece of junk. And when you actually get into a conflict and you see how well it performs, how long it lasts before it breaks down, and like I said, one of the biggest blunders Donald Trump has made is that cruise missile attack onto that Syrian air base, where they launched 60 cruise missiles. One of them apparently barely cleared the launch tube before it went in the ocean. And of the remaining 59, most of them missed the target. And everybody on Earth who's got a checkbook out looking to buy weapons saw that. And so demand for Russian warships, other weapons, is skyrocketing right now. Because people are aware that these are weapons that may actually have to be used. They're not just going to go down the main street on a parade on holidays and say, look how butch we are, we've got this, we got a tank, and we got rockets, and it all looks very pretty. One thing about a real war is it very quickly weeds out the flakes and the frauds. Harry Truman had to do that going into World War II. That's how he became famous and popular with the American people. Because he was going around to these military contractors, and he was basically kicking butt, saying, if you are not delivering, you are not getting paid. So, okay. As I mentioned before, one of the reasons Crown Prince bin Salman is starting to feel some opposition against his accession to the throne is that Saudi Arabia, and along with that the United Arab Emirates, they're boycotting Qatar, and they're getting all close and buddy-buddy with Israel. And everybody's wondering what the heck is going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of back-channel discussion going on. And apparently over in South Korea, their president has now reversed his policy on North Korea. It's not going to offer that handshake. So they found his leash as well. All right, I want to give you my analysis of what's going on. Right now, the U.S. government, the war hawks, are feeling cornered and desperate. They are about to lose in Syria. And if they lose in Syria, the momentum that is carrying this whole war agenda forward, the one that General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on back in, I think it was 2005, is going to be in serious trouble. If the U.S. loses in Syria, the American people are going to say, this has gone on enough. And right now, the wars are an economically losing proposition. There's no back-end profit at this point, other than for the heroin dealers. They're spending trillions of dollars on all of these conflicts in all of these countries. They're stuck in these quagmires. It has turned into a war of attrition in many of these countries, the same thing that brought the U.S. down in Vietnam. And by the way, years ago when the U.S. was starting this campaign of aggression, Putin came out and said, if the U.S. starts invading countries, we'll drag them into a war of attrition, just like Vietnam, and they will lose again. And that seems to be what's happening. So they can't quit the war policy and turn around because the economy will collapse. Everybody's been loaning them money and buying on into all of this war effort in the expectation of an eventual victory and the spoils, which are many and varied. First and foremost, the destruction of the ruble and the yuan to allow the U.S. paper dollar to regain global hegemonic domination. That is now in doubt. And so the U.S. can't quit. They're feeling cornered and desperate people do very desperate things, which is why I'm concerned about the immediate future. More false flags. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So the question that we have to look at is, the U.S. government is cornered. They're not winning in Syria. Russia is basically holding them in check in Syria, but being held in check does not work for the U.S. government agenda. So are they going to go after Assad with a decapitation strike? Or are they going to go ahead and force a confrontation directly with Russia? And how are they going to make it look like this is all Russia's fault? Now, obviously, we're seeing John McCain is still out there pushing the line that Russia's bad, Russia's evil, Russia does terrible things, Vladimir Putin passes wind in the elevators of the Kremlin, and so forth and so on. But I imagine right now they're in a state of panic. This war, these wars, plural, have gone on far longer and cost far more than was originally planned. And we're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's a big reason why things are so bad in this country, because of the $500 billion a year being spent on the Defense Department. And there are other costs associated with the military that get hidden in other parts of the budget. But the money is running out. People are out of work. And yes, they can go on printing more money over at the Federal Reserve, and that's going to crash the dollar internationally, because the U.S. is no longer able to force other countries to use the dollar. More and more countries are turning away. So they may feel that something dramatic is needed to get out of that corner and regain the initiative, which they clearly have lost. More about that later in regards to another story. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. As you know, Trump won the presidency based in part on his pledge to make America great again and bring back the manufacturing. And now, according to CNBC, BMW, one of the largest car manufacturers in Germany, is going to go invest in Trump's America. They are going to invest $600 million right in the good old U.S. of A., create 1,000 jobs, and make the cars right here. And BMW makes very, very good cars. Now, we can all celebrate and applaud, but again, 1,000 jobs, it's a good start, but we have 100 million Americans unable to find a job right now. We really do. All right, going to go back and take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I wanted to raise a question here and kind of preface it by saying if there's one thing that I've utterly learned over the last year is that the intelligence community is off on its own, and the defense community. I mean, remember when Obama had an agreement with Putin and the Air Force bombed Syrian troops back in September and scotched, the ceasefire, and the leaks from every segment of the intelligence community. And I watched and I read the Seymour Hersh article off your site yesterday, and where he's saying that basically Trump did it over and above the advice of the intelligence community. This latest bombing about the gas and all that, and I'm wondering when did the intelligence community ever, other than mounting false flags and to make it look like we needed to attack, when did they ever recommend not attacking? And we know in the past that they came out and said, should we misbrief Trump? And why should we believe what the Seymour Hersh story? I'm not saying that Trump may be as culpable as Hersh says, but why would we? Isn't it a departure for the intelligence community and defense community to come out and say that they recommended against doing anything in Syria?
Well, certainly the Defense Department is always in favor of another war because war means more money. It means more rapid promotion and advancement, more toys to play with. I think there have been recent exceptions to that. Mattis is saying we shouldn't go into North Korea, and that seems like a much more honest and objective assessment of what's going on over there. Peter, can you stay on the line? Because I want to come back and talk to this issue. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And adversity between the intelligence agencies and the military and the president is nothing new. Certainly that was the case with President John F. Kennedy. And even before the assassination, the defense chiefs who were there trying to escalate the war in Vietnam were feeding McNamara false information so that McNamara in turn would feed that information to the president and basically an attempt to maneuver him. Very often the military will try and change policy. We all know that Khrushchev and Kennedy were working to sort of defuse the Cold War tensions, but of course the Pentagon loved the Cold War, the defense industries loved the Cold War, and it all sort of fell apart when Francis Gary Powers U-2 was shot down over Russia, which had the Russian hardliners saying, see, you can't trust the U.S., you can't trust the U.S., and there were rumors, not able to confirm, that somebody had actually sabotaged Francis Gary Powers U-2 so that it would have to come down to a lower altitude where the Russian missiles could, in fact, take it down. And it was a big, ugly stink. Even all the way back at the first days of the CIA, politicians like Harry Truman admitted it had this danger to just go rogue and go out of control, but there it was considered a necessary evil. Today, I think it is simply evil.
Well, Mike, for the sake of argument, let's say, I mean, by the way, it's pretty clear that last sarin attack or whatever it was not what it was said to be, and it looks like, we ginned that up as well. And now they're saying
actually, I think they took advantage of just something that happened, because apparently there was a weapon depot in Idlib that was bombed by the Syrian forces, and it caused some collateral damage. And somebody said, well, we can claim it's another gas attack, and they just sort of moved on it.
In any event, it was mischaracterized by the media and by the intelligence community as well. But
not by the intelligence community. The media certainly did. But we've got all these people within the military intelligence community saying, no, we knew at the time there was no evidence of sarin.
I'm not sure where we separate the media from the intelligence community, Mike. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that the Hersh story was correct. That, well, let me just make my opinion here. If we know that they're trying to undercut Trump at every turn.
Yes.
And so if they come out and delegitimize what he did last time, and say, well, we came out and we let everybody know that we were against it. The next time, when they really need to have that, and Trump goes ahead and attacks or whatever, they can come out and say, well, we really need it this time. Or, it's just, the bottom line is you can't trust a freaking thing that these guys say.
And you're absolutely right. And you're not going to get an argument from me on that. That's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing here, is because everything coming out of the government and the intelligence agency and the corporate media is a lie. The real danger is, are they lying to the president? And that seems to be an aspect that Hersh didn't really give consideration to when he wrote his article.
Yeah, he could be getting used just like the rest of us, It's just, we just don't know. And that's the problem. It is a completely evil agency, as you said, the whole community. And if we can't have trust from what the president says and trust from how he's being advised for the people's good, then these these things need to be abolished, really.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
You know, but doesn't it strike you funny, Mike, that they would, when have they ever backed up Trump? They're consistent in even this story in not backing Trump up, but also, what's inconsistent is they're always in favor of strikes or interventions or what have you. Just about always in my lifetime.
Yeah, but it's tempered by the reality that the American people need to believe that this is the right thing to do. The Defense Department, the Pentagon can't just go off and start dropping bombs on people in other countries without the American people saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so anybody who is planning these military operations, they're having to say, we have to come up with something where the American people think this is right and just to do. The Iraqis are stealing incubators from Kuwait and leaving the babies on the floor. Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, so forth and so on. The lie this time was that Assad had carried out a gas attack in Idlib, and that was definitely hoisting with their petard because the story just didn't make sense from the very, very beginning. There was no reason for Assad to do something that stupid. And there certainly isn't a reason for him to do it now.
Yeah, Mike, if we just what we need to do is completely disengage.
I'm looking at Fox News. I'm looking at Fox News, and the lower banner is saying military option for North Korea being prepared for Trump.
That's right.
Boy, I'm sure glad I'm too old to be drafted.
Yeah, me too. Just wanted to raise that point, Mike. That let me go read that Fox stuff and listen to you at the same time.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call, and I think it's important to remember we're not dealing with a monolithic governmental structure. We're dealing with all these little tiny factions fighting each other. In fact, I'd have to characterize the entire U.S. government right now as severely factionalized and even fragmented, and it's almost on the verge of not being able to function at all. Getting on back to the world of corporate media, apparently Greta Van Susteren is now out at MSNBC after being there for just 6 months. And we're not getting the reason why she is out. They're making all the polite noises about how she's one of the few broadcasters who can say they've hosted shows on all 3 major cable news networks. But again, more shakeups in the corporate media there. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. How you doing? Listen, Mike. I just want to change the comment. I'm going to make a comment and change the subject a little bit. Remember that series in HBO, Boardwalk Empire?
I never really watched that.
Well, anyway, they show a part where Warren Harding had a illegitimate daughter, illegitimate child.
Yes.
Now, besides Thomas Jefferson, in your knowledge, what other presidents ever had illegitimate children?
Well, Bill Clinton had at least one, little Danny. It's not exactly something I've kept a list of, to be very honest, because I don't believe in embarrassing and humiliating the children. My attitude is very much hands-off. It's not their fault, what happened. So I tend not to make a big issue about that. Now that Chelsea Clinton, of course, is becoming a public figure herself, and certainly during the campaign, it was fodder, and a lot of people did talk about how Danny was sort of technically her half-half brother, and meanwhile, of course, the fact that Chelsea Clinton appears to have been the daughter of Webster Hubbell. And if you read some of the stories about what was going on back in the Arkansas days, it was a wild town. And apparently the Rose Law Firm actually had their own little mountain cabin so that people could sort of get away and have moments of privacy and do things that are best not done in the eyes of the public.
Yeah, but what about LBJ?
No idea.
No idea. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Yeah, it's not exactly something I spend a lot of time on here. Now, we're getting on back to the economic news. And at this point, it looks like Illinois is about to default on their mountain of debt. People are asking, will they ever be able to pay their debts? Will they even be able to pay simply the overdue bills? And they're asking, is it possible for a state to go bankrupt? And yes, it is. Several states declared bankruptcy during the Depression of the 1930s. But it's definitely a train wreck, and they are not the only ones. Over in Detroit, they're in serious problems, and a big part of it has to do with the loss of the auto industry. But they have another problem, and that is that decades of systemic political corruption have caught up with them. Because corruption obviously has a cash cost that goes along with it. We're going to go back to the phones here. Mike in Alaska, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I want to talk about that fire in London.
Yeah.
That block tower.
The Grenfell Tower.
I've been meaning to call in about it. Something struck me with that was, it is a tragedy, but it happened about the same time they had that gas incident in New York. I don't know, that it kind of got dwarfed by the London news, but there was some sort of a leak, and a bunch of people got hurt pretty bad by some carbon monoxide or whatever. And the commonality between the two incidences, when I looked at the different articles, was there's a lot of these housing blocks and areas in large cities. We could be talking about L.A.,
yes,
New York, London, whatever, where the people inside the towers, now, of course, it's a tragedy and we don't want anyone to die, but they cannot communicate their needs to the local community because it's literally a Tower of Babel. That's what, I know you're not a biblical guy, but that's what it looked like to me. As I read these articles, it kept talking about people inside the buildings who either couldn't speak English or who the people that were in charge of maintaining these buildings and checking on them didn't want to go into the building for whatever reason. Perhaps it was not safe to go in.
No, it's just they didn't want to spend the money. I mean, the language barrier was certainly a contributing factor, but that polystyrene cladding, which was highly flammable and puts out toxic smoke, that was a big part of the problem. There was only one stairwell in the entire building and no sprinkler system. It is a classic cascade of minor events that lead to disaster.
Right, but what I'm thinking, and I'd like your thoughts on it, is when you have, now I'm not saying this is always the case, but in places like, for example, in Sweden, when you get into some areas where, let's say, it's no-go for the fire department or no-go for a city contractor who installs sprinklers, and then they don't close the buildings down, they just say, okay, here's the building, put all these people in there, you're literally setting them up for a third world style disaster because you're not doing the maintenance, you're not doing the inspections. That's what struck me about these two incidences, is that it seemed as if everyone forgot about it completely.
Well, we're seeing the deterioration of our infrastructure in general because of the cost of the war, and certainly at the Grenfell Tower, they did not have the issue of a no-go zone. The people who were living there were immigrants and refugees, but it wasn't in particular an area where there was a great deal of violence. So that really isn't a factor there. And I don't think there's a link between the Grenfell Tower and what happened with the carbon monoxide in New York. They're just two incidents. It's a large planet, and things tend to happen all over. The real scandal here, of course, is that now they're starting to inspect those other towers, and they're finding, so many of them have this same very, very dangerous polystyrene cladding. And they're all going to have the cladding stripped off and replaced with something that's actually approved and safe and legal to use there. Now, when the Grenfell Tower first happened, they tried to sort of explain it away by saying, well, this kind of cladding is legal in Great Britain. It's actually banned in a lot of other countries, including here in the U.S. Then it turned out that there's a qualifier on the British law. It's okay to use that cladding on buildings that are only 1 or 2 stories tall. It is banned for tall buildings which is where it was used. And somebody somewhere made the decision to use this less expensive but illegal cladding on these buildings, and that's the person who really is going to get the blame for this.
Mike, as far as the war stuff with North Korea and Syria, I think that maybe I'm just an optimist, but I do think that we're at an end of an era as far as some of the interventions. I think that the people are waking up as far as information, internet, and what they can read about these things. The rate at which the false information can be dispelled is so quick now. But also with this last election, enough people realize that the war is really at home, and we have a lot of issues here. So how many people want to be drafted when they see the infrastructure at home and the illegal issues and all the other stuff going on here?
Well, they're not going to want to be drafted anyway. I remember all the protests about that in Vietnam, and I think the only reason they have not activated the draft now is they understand it will provoke massive opposition from the American people. Now, our government, the U.S. government, it's not my government anymore, the U.S. government may just decide they're just going to go ahead with the wars anyway and not really give a care about the public response here. But again, if your civil population does not believe in the moral rightness and the necessity of the war, they're not going to want to bear the burdens that war brings, even to the victorious side, and certainly not to the losing side as well. So this is a bad recipe moving forward on these wars.
There's enough people that are in my age group that see how people who went to Iraq and Afghanistan were treated, which is worse than illegal immigrants, or I guess you could say how the illegal immigrants were treated better than them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if I was being forced in and I was at the recruiting station, or I was being put on a bus and I was just talking like this, yeah, they probably smack me a few times to get me to stop, but it's like a little satellite going around the earth. If you keep pointing out these inconvenient truths, the real ones, not the Al Gore ones, and just say, you know, why am I going to do, you know, why? And, you know, point out, so will I be treated like this when I get back? And, you know, what will the town look like when I get back?
Well,
they can't handle it.
Again, you know, I don't want to disrespect the people in uniform here. And by the way, one final thought. I'm going to have to let you go. We're at a commercial break here. A military draft is actually unconstitutional because of the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for punishment as a crime, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. A draft is actually unconstitutional. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking about the economic news. And according to this article that's over in Investment Watch blog, Medicaid is going to get $71 billion more dollars in the current budget, but CNN calls it a cut. Now, in this case, it's not CNN's fault. There's a mindset in government that every year there'll be a budget increase. And if you get an increase and it's less than you expect, it's seen as a cut. And it's kind of a deceptive way of looking at it, but that's basically the way it works. Now, as you know, the health care debate is still going on, and it's looking less and less like there will be a vote tomorrow. But apparently, Democrat Maxine Waters, who seems to have had her reality license expire a long time ago, was out there screaming about how if they take away Obamacare and replace it with Trump care, it's going to be a disaster for everyone. She actually claims 700 billion with a B, Americans were at risk of losing health care. 700 billion Americans. The actual population of the United States is roughly 300 million. And 700 billion is several times more than the population of the entire planet. Something like 100 times. Apparently, things are getting very tense in Argentina. Anti-government protesters down there. Police are clashing with them, using rubber bullets, tear gas, water cannons. over in Venezuela, where they're still going through their upset, they've adopted a symbol, if you will, of the Maidan in Ukraine. They're starting to make these little shields that are very brightly painted, very colorful, and they became an icon of the Ukrainian coup d'etat on TV, and apparently the Venezuelan protesters have started to emulate that as well. And again, in the case of Venezuela and maybe Argentina, we may be seeing the tail end of the usual U.S. program of destabilize, cause civil unrest, bring the government down, and put in a new puppet ruler. And we know that certainly in the case of South American countries, the U.S. has been messing about down in South America for decade after decade after decade. And that's the reason they hate the Norteamericanos, not because of our freedoms here. Apparently, as they continue to talk about Brexit, whether it'll be hard, whether it'll be soft, Brussels just displayed an incredible degree of arrogance. They're claiming they want to have an indefinite right to fine Britain after the Brexit. And obviously the idea is that with Britain leaving the EU, their budgets are going to be very tight, and they want Britain to pay for the EU even though it's no longer a member. We got to take a break for station identification. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from James in Texas. James, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to talk about if they were going to implement a draft, would you see it now, since a lot more people are politically aware? Do you see it now? Probably they're just implemented in certain parts that probably don't have, that much freedoms, like New York State or New Jersey. When I mean by freedoms, like no Second Amendment and no way to really push back if there was, people to come take them if their draft cards were.
Well, they can't do a draft in some states, and not others would violate the Equal Protection Clause. It's going to have to be national all at once. There will be a pushback against it, obviously. In some ways, there's a very covert kind of draft going on now, and it's called an economic draft, and that is you destroy the economy of a country so that young people can't find work, and their only option is to sign up for the military. And we've been seeing stories on the corporate media for the last few days about how there are no summer jobs for kids. These high school graduates have got nothing to do, plus the college graduates who can't find jobs to pay off their student loan debt. And all of a sudden, those military enlistment forms start to look really attractive, or at least a palatable alternative to sleeping in the streets or moving back in with your parents. And again, Claire and I, some years ago, we went down to the Zippies, used to be at the bottom of the hill, and it's right next to the recruiting centers. And there was a bunch of young people who had enlisted in the Air Force, and they were getting ready to head off to wherever it was they were going. And we talked to them and said, why are you joining? And they all pretty much basically said the same thing. There's nothing else. There's nothing else for us. There's no other jobs. This is it. This is all we could find. And so it is an economic draft, and it may be that much of the economic hardships this country is experiencing right now are part of a deliberate program to stampede young people into the military without having to go through the onerous step of imposing an actual draft.
You're right. That way is working real good, because about 1.5 million troops went through Iraq or something like that, right? Not in all, but as the rotations went, that's what it added up to.
Yes.
Most of them were what, like under, you could easily say under 30, under 25 maybe, right?
Yes.
And if they were going to, that's what I mean, like the ground troops, like you said, those people that you start to recruit, and they're going into the Air Force. Where are they going to get all the boots to fill that? Because that ground combat role, you can't get away from it. Even if you bomb and bomb and bomb, somebody's going to have to go into the rubble and secure it, and
Yeah, well, that's generally what the Army and the Marines do, and most young people, when they decide enlisting in the military is where they want to go, they're going to look at the Air Force or they're going to look at the Navy as being less likely to actually involve losing portions of their anatomy. I remember when I was in high school, I briefly considered enlisting in the Air Force because I love flying in airplanes, but I realized that with my eyesight, I'd wind up spending my entire time in the Air Force repairing helicopter transmissions or something. So in any event,
Did you go through that whole Vietnam thing? Did you go through that whole Vietnam draft thing? Like, how did it work back then? How were they able to do it back then?
You mean the protests?
No. How did the draft come about, and how did
they simply announced
no automatically, or what?
Well, you know, young people had to register for the draft. I think it was on their 18th birthday. And by the way, you have to do it now. They already have, you know, kids are having to sign up for the draft even though it's not active.
Selective service.
Yeah, that's it. And so, you know,
that's what they used in Korea.
Well, they call it selective service because draft has more of a negative connotation. But yeah, young people are required to sign up for selective service, and then when they hit the point, they say, we have to start this thing, and they start going on down. And in the Vietnam era, they had a lottery where they pulled out so many birthdays. And I actually, because I was hired by NASA and I was doing some classified work, I actually had an occupational deferment for the first 2 years that I had to go through the draft lottery. And then in the third year, I just took my chance along with everybody else, and they pulled my birthday like way down the list, and I didn't have to go.
Hey, but it's not just young people in selective service. You know, you have to have selective service in order to get a job or to go to college. And I think it's one more thing, but I forget. But I know those two things. To get a job in America and to go to college, you have to already have signed up. Oh, and I think get like a loan, some type of loan, a college loan.
I don't know about the loans, but yeah, if you're in violation of the law for registering for selective service, all kinds of bad things will happen. They're trying to drive you into that system. But again, a military draft, involuntary servitude in the military violates the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Now, I understand there is this little thing where they line you up and say, if you're ready to join the military, step forward, and then that step forward is considered you actually volunteered, even though you really didn't. And it is amazing how fast and loose the government plays with the word voluntary, where you're told that this is voluntary or that is voluntary, but it isn't really.
I don't know, but you're a big movie buff, right, Mike? I'm pretty sure you remember that movie, The Thin Red Line?
Yeah, I saw it many years ago.
In the beginning of the movie, he says, like, he was going to get, because I guess one of the main characters saw the war coming and he was going to get out. And the guy said, you know, like, he was telling the story. They said, yeah, they told me if I get out, we're going to come after you and we're going to put you as an infantry man, because he was getting out as an officer, but he saw what was on the horizon. And sure enough, he was there in New Guinea. And they were older looking people. You know, those kids like 30s, in their 30s.
Well, you know, the young kids get to be the rifle carriers, and their officers are a little bit older. But if you have needed specialty skills, you can be drafted at a much older age. Think back to the Korean War, where they were drafting doctors and nurses and all kinds of other people into these specialty skills that the military had not made proper and adequate preparations for. So we could see that happen.
No, the guy in the movie. The guy in the movie got out of the army.
James.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Can you avoid cutting me off mid-sentence because that's impolite?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. So you were saying?
Yes, the guy in the movie, he got out as an officer, and they were telling him, you better stay in, or we're going to come after you, which means in the draft, and we're going to draft you as just a regular infantry guy. And that's how he ended up, you know, fighting up the hills in New Guinea, a Jap machine gun.
I really don't remember the movie, but it strikes me if he was already serving, then they can't draft him. And, of course, the rules are very complicated about stop loss, and they can change the rules at any time. One of my concerns is if we actually get into a major global war, we have close members of our family, Claire and I, who have both been in the military, and they served, they did their time and everything, but in an emergency they could be called back, and one of them is a doctor. So it's a concern. They can come in and say, we're reactivating you, and there's really nothing you can say about it. The laws of the nation serve the war machine, not the people. Okay?
What do you think would make them do that? Would it be like a terrible defeat in the Middle East or something like that? Because right now they're using just nothing but special forces. But what happens when that, you know, because you reported they're already tired, they're worn out. I mean, some of them are even having to buy their own weapons.
Well, they're using the special forces, they're using mercenaries, they're using these terrorist groups, but they're relying on their wonder weapons, which proved to be a strategic mistake when the Nazis tried the same thing toward the end of World War II. When they start running out of the Tomahawk cruise missiles, when they start running out of the drones, when they start running out of automated this and that, that's when they're going to start looking at a draft to get boots on the ground to go in and control the territory. Because one lesson that you take out of the war in Vietnam is you cannot win a war from the air. You have to go in on the ground and control that territory.
Oh, well, we weren't even trying to win that war because we didn't even use the Navy like we should have had. And that's the whole point. Like you said, that war was just to make money, right? Well, Mike, it's been nice talking to you. I got to get going.
All right.
Have a good one, okay?
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Let's see. There we are. All right. Getting on back to the economy and segueing into the European Union. At this point, it's becoming very obvious that they have really botched up the issue of the Greek debt. The first mistake they made was this idea that even though half of Greece's debt was created through fraud by a previous government, that the Greek people were still obligated to pay it. We were hearing it from people like Christine Lagarde. We don't care where the debt came from. Debt is holy. Debt is sacrosanct. You will pay. And Greece has been sinking lower and lower, and then more and more austerity. And they're clearly on a path that is not going to lead to their recovery. And the contagion is spreading across Europe. A lot of those member nations are in serious trouble. So up in Germany, Angela Merkel is being attacked by her own ministers on the way Germany has waded in on the Greek debt, and said it's that this debt issue from the European Central Bank and the IMF, it's part of what's ripping the EU apart. And I knew that this was going to be an issue all the way back years ago. And I said the problem with the European Union is it was created with a built-in self-destruct device called the European Central Bank. And add to that the refugee crisis, and to be very honest, I don't think the EU is going to hold together much longer. People are waiting to see if Great Britain can successfully get out of the EU without being invaded or bombed. And everybody else is ready to go here. Now, Angela Merkel is backing Macron's Eurozone reform plans, and it turns out she's got an agenda. Apparently, Merkel wants Germany to be put in control of the European Central Bank. It's all about the money. It's all about the machinery to loot and plunder the people with artificially created debt. And here's an interesting point that you need to remember. When you look at the privations of the ECB, when you look at how tyrannical Brussels has become, when you look at the refugee crisis, you need to go on back and realize not all of this was done with the permission of the European people, in particular that refugee crisis. Nobody in Europe got a chance to vote on changing the immigration laws in their country. Under the EU agreement, there were no borders inside the European Union. It was a free travel zone, free trade zone. In fact, that's what it was supposed to be at the beginning. Free trade, free travel. That was it. And then Brussels just started arrogating power to itself and started behaving in a very unfriendly manner. But this decision to start dropping the external border of the European Union as a whole, that solely came out of Brussels. And nobody in Europe got to vote on that. And that is fueling part of the hostility toward the refugee crisis. Now, interestingly enough, the Bosnian Serb leader, Milorad Dodik, is saying the EU is fading away. It's losing influence in that part of the world, and countries like Russia and China are becoming the key players on the international stage, and that is true. And it doesn't just apply to Europe. It's applying here to the United States of America. We're in this mess because countries want to swing over to Russia, like Ukraine before the coup d'etat, like Turkey appears to be doing now. Countries don't want to get involved in the petrodollar deal anymore. They don't want to be forced to use U.S. paper dollars. They're going with the ruble, yuan, or direct currency exchanges. Europe and the United States are failing empires. And unfortunately, they're behaving like it. They're just lashing out at everybody. Now, for you gun rights advocates, a little bit of good news, believe it or not, coming out of the Czech Republic. The Czech Parliament has just amended their constitution to allow ordinary citizens to take up arms against the terrorists. The vote was 139 yes out of the 168-member Chamber of Deputies, and basically it gives the Czech people the right to shoot terrorists on sight. You carry a gun, you see a terrorist in front of you, you are free to drop them right there and then. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm predicting you're not going to see a lot of terror attacks in the Czech Republic from now on. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful idea. And not everybody has to have a gun. Somebody's going to go out and commit an act of terror, and he's looking at a large crowd, and he's saying, I wonder how many of those are carrying a concealed weapon. Because it's now legal for them to shoot me if I do my act of terror. Now, we have mentioned many, many times before that dramatic claims are often frauds for political gain. And we have a good example here. There's a guy up in Pennsylvania, and Joseph Hurt. He's 86 years old, and for years he has been claiming that he escaped from Auschwitz, and he actually met track and field star Jesse Owens, who embarrassed Hitler at the German Olympics, and he even met Joseph Mengele. And apparently, in his elderly age, he had an attack of conscience, and he actually wrote a letter to his local newspaper saying that, yes, he had fabricated the entire story from beginning to end. And he's saying he was never a prisoner at Auschwitz. He didn't meet Jesse Owens. He didn't meet Mengele. He just made it on up. And then he tried to justify it by saying, well, I was trying to do everything in my power to prevent the loss of the truth about wartime, life and death at Auschwitz. In other words, his excuse is he was trying to protect the truth with another lie, which generally will not work. Now, over in Lakewood, New Jersey, there has been another case of welfare fraud uncovered. And apparently 7 married couples from the same shore town. This is a very wealthy neighborhood. And it includes a rabbi and his wife. And they have been charged with misrepresenting their income to swindle the state out of a combined $2 million in public welfare benefits to which they were not entitled. And I think this is a good example of money junkyism at work. See, years and years ago, before I got blacklisted out of Hollywood, I actually felt I was rich. I had a comfortable home. I had enough money for my needs and a few caprices. And no, I wasn't a millionaire, and I wasn't driving a Bugatti, and I wasn't wearing a $100,000 watch. Then as now, I had a Casio. But I felt rich. I was doing okay. The problem is people who are so addicted to money. They have to have more. No matter how much they have, they must have more. Bernie Madoff's a good example of that. And part of the pathology is that money junkies can't feel that they are rich unless they look around at everybody else and see them dirt poor. They can't look at the total of their wealth and say, I have enough. And that's a problem. Here we have these people in Lakewood who obviously had very comfortable lifestyles. But it wasn't enough. They had to have more. That's a sickness. It's a mental illness. And I think it needs to be treated as such. I'm never going to be rich. I just want to be comfortable. I want to give the Lady Claire the life that I think she deserves. And that's it. After that, I don't need any more. I'm perfectly happy. Anyway, we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the money junkies. I really do think it is a mental illness. And it should be handled the same way we would handle heroin addiction, cocaine addiction. The problem is money addicts look good. They're wearing Armani suits and Gucci shoes. And people look at that in our wearable esteem age, and they want to be just like that. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James from Tokyo. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I kind of agree with you about the whole money thing. I think as long as you got enough to pay the bills and eat okay, and I think everything's cool. So that's kind of my philosophy, actually, for the past 10 years. But I want to talk about the potential of war in North Korea and Syria.
Yes.
I think it's a misinformation campaign. I just can't see America attacking North Korea with all their artillery aimed at South Korea. And also with the threat that Russia said, if you go to the, I can't remember, east or west, probably west of the Euphrates, we're going to go after you. What do you think?
I would sure love it if you were correct. I respectfully disagree. The United States has embarked on this war agenda for geopolitical global objectives. Wesley Clark basically laid it all out. And now they're stuck. They're halfway in. They can't turn around and go back. And so, yeah, I think they're going to move forward. And I think they're going to possibly consider decapitation strikes at both Assad and Kim Jong-un, which will set a very dangerous precedent of other countries doing a decapitation strike against our government.
It's possible, but whatever happens, I think we're going to find out pretty damn soon.
Yeah, I think you're right here because, again, the U.S. is on the verge of losing in Syria. They don't have a lot of time to wait on that particular issue. And, again, this growing confrontation with Russia, again, listening to what McCain is saying and the media's constant drumbeat, Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad, it is obvious Russia is an ultimate target along with China. Because of the displacement of the U.S. dollar by the ruble and the yuan. And obviously we're very concerned here in Hawaii that if there is a nuclear exchange in a global war with Russia and China, this island will get hit. I mean, the best we can hope for is that Russia wants to capture our harbor facilities intact so that they can use them, in which case they just launch cruise missiles against, control command buildings, and we'd sit up here on the hill and have a really nice fireworks show. But it obviously poses a very real and very personal risk.
Yeah, I'm in a same kind of situation being in Tokyo because there's so many American U.S. bases within the vicinity, and they will definitely be attacked. Yokosuka base, Naval Base, Atsugi Air Force Base. So I'm in the same kind of situation that you are.
Yeah. Well, again, World War I actually pretty much involved just Europe. World War II was mostly global. I'm afraid World War III will be all-inclusive. I don't think there's really any place that is going to be perfectly safe in what's about to come. And it's depressing, but what can I tell you?
All right, thanks, Mike. Nice talking to you, and the best to the lovely Lady Claire, okay?
I will tell her that when she gets home this afternoon, and thank you very much for the phone call. Apparently, to get on back to CNN, the fake news network, or the Bezos blog, apparently CNN's main Twitter account, somebody did an auditing on it and found that CNN has 17 million fake followers. So they're trying to inflate their numbers, and again, we had this story about a month and a half ago where the websites of these major corporate media outlets were apparently using Chinese click bots to artificially inflate the clicks on their websites to make it look like they had more of a readership. And in the process, of course, they're defrauding their advertisers. So it's really starting to come apart. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently a House committee today has passed an amendment to repeal the broad war-making powers approved by Congress following 9/11 that have allowed the U.S. military to take various actions overseas in the years since without congressional approval. So they're trying to restore the war-making authority back to the Congress, which is where the Constitution vests it. And whether they're doing it because they realize it's gone out of control or they're doing it just because Trump is the president now, it's kind of hard to say, but at least it's a start to try and curb all this insanity in. Apparently down in Tampa, Florida, at the Big Bend Power Station, there's been what is described as a major incident, and at least 4 people have been taken to the hospital as a result of a burn incident that occurred just a little while ago. Now, it's a coal-fired plant. It is not nuclear. It's owned by TECO Energy, but apparently they've had a major, major problem there as well. And it's a reminder that our infrastructure is being neglected during this period of endless war across the globe. And we can expect more of these industrial failures. Now, let's talk about computers and ransomware, because this global cyber attack continues to spread around the globe. It is coming here to the United States. It's hitting energy companies, shipping lines, and it is, unfortunately, an alarming demonstration of just how the entire system can be brought to a halt, how fragile it really is, how dangerous these NSA tools are, and how vulnerable we are because over the years, the intelligence agencies have deliberately bored security breaches in all of our computers, which are now being used by this device. And apparently the latest victim of this ransomware attack is the property arm of the French bank BNP Paribas, And apparently FedEx may have been hit. They're being very cagey about it. But apparently FedEx was moved to actually suspend trading of its shares on the New York Stock Exchange after admitting their subsidiary, TNT Express, was hit by some kind of an information system virus. And they're scrambling to get things put back together there. Now, there's a very alarming story that came out of ZDNet. Security experts are looking at the extreme sophistication of the Petya malware, coupled with the fact that nobody seems to have really been paying attention to how files were going to be restored or payments made. Apparently payments can be made, but the files are never unlocked. And they're starting to wonder if, in fact, Petya is not really a ransomware, but is deliberately out to destroy as much IT infrastructure as they can. Now, this gets back to an article I wrote, I think, a little more than a year ago. called Virtual 9/11. Will the U.S. and Israel hack U.S. computers, or global computers in this case, and falsely blame it on Iran or Syria or Russia or China? Now, earlier in the program, I was talking about how our government is feeling cornered and desperate. They're on the verge of losing in Syria. Russia is basically holding them in check, and being held in check does not work for the United States because it's running out of time and it's running out of money. So the U.S. needs to do something that's a game changer to make everybody hate, probably in this case, Russia. And remember, the corporate media has already said this Petya malware, Russia did it. This is all coming from Russia. We know it's from Russia, just like we know Russia hacked the DNC emails and Russia hacked the election. So if, in fact, Petya is going out of control, if it is destroying data on computers all over the world, and it doesn't really seem to be collecting or processing payments, this could be the beginning of that virtual 9/11 we looked at. And what complicates this, the Telegraph is reporting that NATO has stated cyber attacks could trigger Article 5 of the NATO agreement. And Article 5 is NATO's Mutual Defense Clause. In other words, NATO is saying a cyber attack would trigger a military response. And in this article in the Telegraph, they're repeating the claim. We think it's Russia. We think it's Russia. So there won't be any airplanes crashing into skyscrapers. There won't be another assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. He's already dead, quite some time. And an attack on the Internet, the computer. First of all, it's discouraging people from getting on the Internet at all. They're scared they're going to get infected with one of these things. And it would justify the government saying, all right, we're going to have to turn off major portions of the Internet to protect the banks, to protect the corporations, and that all these independent media websites, we're going to have to shut them down. They're spreading malware like crazy. They could shut us all up with a single stroke saying, oh, it's a national emergency from this Russian malware. I think we all agree they're desperate enough to try something like that. Nobody's going to believe them. But if the independent media is now cut off from the Internet, it won't matter anymore, will it? Now, apparently, Facebook censorship is removing 66,000 posts per week. And this article is coming out of thelastgreatstand.com. And it starts out, how do you censor free speech in America? You rebrand it as hate speech. And this is a tactic the left has been using with great success. On college campuses to YouTube, Israel uses the tactic as well. There's only one small problem here. The United States Supreme Court just ruled unanimously there is no hate speech exemption to the First Amendment. So if you've posted to Facebook and they delete it, maybe it's 86,000 posts per week, that's a class action lawsuit for violation of our civil rights. And by the way, I have not been able to post to Facebook for the last 3 days. I'll hit the post button, it just sits there and freezes. I think Facebook doesn't like me anymore. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, he's starting to get delusions of Godhead. He's out there saying he wants Facebook to become more like a church, to bring the world closer together. And like so many other religions throughout history, obviously there is a need to ban the heretics and burn the embarrassing books. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yo, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all this talk of war is nothing but talk. I just don't think it ain't in the heart of the people. Just don't think they're going to get into it.
I know it's not in the heart of the people, but it's not up to the people. And I think from the point of view of the war hawks and the U.S. government, they no longer have a choice. They've gone too far down this agenda. I would love for you to be right. But at this point, I think the government is thinking all they need is a giant propaganda stunt to get us, to get us all war fevered up again and say, yes, we have to get those gosh darn evil whoever it is we're invading this week.
Well, the Internet, as far as the Internet goes, once they try to shut down one section of the Internet, it is going to cause so much trouble for international business that I just don't think, if they try it, they're going to have to put it right back online. This thing is designed so that can't happen. This thing is what you call it's a fail-safe.
Well,
it's designed for information to find its way around the world by going this way or that way or going underneath or taking a sideways cut.
Well, that's how it was originally designed. That's how it was originally designed under DARPA. But with this recent move onto the cloud, there is now a central point where all the information is now going through. And yes, the cloud itself is dispersed, but the cloud itself has a central control where certain things can be blocked. We know that you can simply remove DNS entries to block certain websites. There's all kinds of filtering. They've been working on this for years. At the point where they realized the Internet had broken free of government control, they have devoted a lot of time and energy and money and manpower to figuring out how to put that genie back in the bottle without hurting the businesses that are using it to make money.
Okay, but just remember, that would be like taking away everybody's junk overnight. You imagine all the heroin addicts couldn't get their... If this country's addicted to the Internet, they shut them down. You want them violent in the street? You want a vicious wake-up call? That will do it.
I'm sure you'll still be able to get CNN and MSNBC and the shopping channel and what's the one, the jewelry channel and all the, that'll still be there. You can just satisfy your addiction out there with the online commerce. If you really look at it, what they want to go away, the independent media, we're just a tiny, tiny subset of the entire Internet.
Yeah, but everybody has their favorite websites, and that would be like, that would be like, they're going to need another form of opium from the American people if they want to cut off and protect themselves from the websites they don't like, because everybody has their favorite sites, and that's not going to be very easily done, but we'll see. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it. Thank you very much for the phone call. I would love for all these people calling on in and saying it's not going to happen to be correct. I'll be very honest. I don't want to see a world war. I've been fighting against the world war for 2 decades. I've seen this coming. But again, the problem is from the point of view of the government, they're in too far to quit and turn around. And the only way they can move is forward. They just need to figure out how they're going to do it. And part of that is going to have to be some kind of a hoax or fraud played on the American people to whip up a new war fever against the designated enemy. Now, the hard part there, of course, is the American people's intense distrust of the government and the corporate media, along with the fact that we're just tired of war. We have been at war one place and another for 15 years. We've been at war in Afghanistan longer than we were in World War I and World War II. And the American people, by and large, are very tired. They're tired of the wartime economy. They're tired of all the hardships. And they don't feel any of this is necessary because they don't feel the U.S. government has a right or is serving any kind of a noble purpose going into these other countries here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Sam in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. Turkey, I'm just kind of wondering I've been trying to figure out what their objective is. I just wonder what your opinion is as far as the coup attempt in Turkey, and if they're siding with Russia or with us, or, because we're helping the Kurds, but then Turkey's part of NATO. So Turkey's role to me is just, I can't figure it out.
Well, they are definitely the loose cannon on the deck. The botched U.S. coup against Erdogan has resulted in serious blowback. And yes, Turkey is moving closer to Russia. Turkey is very much opposed to the Kurds because the Kurds have been acting very poorly against them. Turkey does not want to sacrifice any of their territory for future Kurdistan. Neither, for that matter, does Syria or Iraq. Turkey right now is very angry with the United States that we are supplying the Kurds with heavy weapons. Now, the U.S. is assuring Turkey that when ISIS is conquered, we will recover all those weapons from the Kurds, and that is wishful thinking. The Kurds are not going to surrender those weapons. They're going to, wrap them up in Kosmoline and bury them in the desert where nobody knows where they are. They're not going to get those weapons back. And Erdogan knows this, and he understands that after ISIS is defeated in his ongoing conflict against the creation of a new Kurdistan, he is going to have to be fighting those U.S.-supplied weapons, and he's not happy about that at all.
Did they sign a pipeline deal with Russia recently?
I think they did. They're getting away from this whole Ukraine nonsense. They're going with a completely new pipeline that bypasses Ukraine completely.
Huh. Okay, well, thanks. That was my comment there.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, again, with this idea of blaming Russia and blaming Russia and blaming Russia and blaming Russia, apparently U.S. senators want to ban the Pentagon and eventually the entire government from using the Kaspersky antivirus software. And they're out there screaming that Kaspersky Labs is an agent of the Russian government, and they're using their antivirus software to spy on people. And to be very honest, I trust the Kaspersky antivirus before I would trust any antivirus software created in the United States of America. But that's how far they're taking this Russia-bashing situation. Now, Kaspersky is an independent company. They're not officially connected to any government. They are, in fact, a global company. They have offices all over the world, including right here in the United States of America, because they sell their software in all these different languages for all these different versions of the operating systems here. But again, they're still pushing this narrative, Russia spying, Russia hacking, and that is why I'm very concerned about this latest malware, which is very lethal, very effective, and not well thought out in terms of the issue of paying the ransom and getting your data back here. Now, apparently there is a new bill working its way through the New York State legislature that will allow the police to search through drivers' cell phones following traffic incidents to determine if the person was using their phone while behind the wheel. Many states have laws saying you cannot be talking on the cell phone while you're driving. Now, in some states, you can use the little tiny plug-in headsets, but apparently they're going to have this device that will download all your smartphone activity in seconds, and they will look at your call log and the GPS tracking and say, well, you were talking while you were driving. How they're going to know that they weren't using the headset or not, we don't know. Or maybe they're going to ban the headsets as well. And it's another cash grab. Here in Hawaii, if you're using your phone behind the wheel, it's a $300 fine. And unfortunately, there's no exception for things like using the phone's GPS to find where you're going. There was actually a big stink where there was a traffic jam in Waikiki, and the cars were sitting absolutely motionless, and the drivers were on their phones, and the cops just walked down the line writing out the tickets. 300, 300, 300, 300, 300. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to come back to the last segment of our program. We got one caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take our last phone call of the day. Ray in San Jose. Aloha. What's on your mind today? You're on the air.
Yeah, about Russia. How who turned them into Russia? I mean, we're being influenced, and the influence is obvious. It's about war, but who is influencing us to war? History. We need to re-study our history. Because Germany, Russia, communism, those are key words. I thank you.
Well, you're welcome, but present-day Russia is not a communist country. That all went away with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the new Russian republics are probably more capitalist now than the United States, which is clearly descending into fascism. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And apparently the Senate was not able to come to an agreement on the health care bill, and they've gone on their 4th of July recess, leaving that pretty much untaken care of, and I'm sure the arguments are going to continue when they get on back here. Adding fuel to the fire, we were talking about NATO is saying cyber attacks activate Article 5. Over in Great Britain, Defense Secretary Michael Fallon is saying that Britain is prepared to launch military retaliation, including troops and airstrikes against foreign state hackers targeting Great Britain. So I'm getting a real sick feeling that we are, in fact, looking at a potential virtual 9/11. Just like that article I wrote all that time ago, and I'm going to be really angry if I'm the one who actually gave them that idea. It's going to make me feel pretty darn sick here. The United States is now saying that if you want to take your laptop into the cabin on the flight, you will have to submit to extra security checks. Otherwise, you'll have to check your laptop in your checked baggage, where it's in all probability going to be stolen from anyway. So they're calling for enhanced screening of passengers and their electronic devices, enhanced security protocols around aircraft and passenger areas, the use of advanced scanning technology, a new machine to give us skin cancer, and an expansion of canine screening, which I don't really object to because I like dogs. And, you know, having a dog to pet while standing there in the TSA line makes the experience, to me, a little more tolerable here. Over in Italy, where they believe in very healthy eating. In fact, they have a joke about American food. If you want to get embalmed, go to America. Italy has now banned aspartame and monosodium glutamate from all Italian restaurants. And those are two of the chemicals that I realized were part of my weight problem, which I am now pretty much over, thankfully, because I avoid those chemicals. And so good for the Italians there. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Friday. The Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3. Please take what you're learning here, make it go viral, especially those videos where the CNN people are saying the Russia story is all nonsense. It feels like we're just on the verge of a major global catastrophe, and we have to just do everything we can to stop it by getting the word out that this can't be allowed to go forward. Nobody's going to win a nuclear war except the bankers. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.